Hello, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here with y'all. And it was such a nice invitation from Jim. I'm a local author. I'm from Lucedale, Mississippi, and I made it all the way across the state line to Sims, Alabama, where I have a small farm and I have an animal rescue. I like to tell people that writing is my joy and rescuing animals is my mission. So that's what I do. I've published over 80 books. I write mostly mysteries, some paranormal mysteries, some horror, some literary, some short stories. Just I kind of write what I read, and I read everything. So I taught creative writing at the University of South Alabama for 14 years. And it was there really that I learned about fantasy and sci-fi, because that's not an area I had read a lot, but some of my students were interested in writing it, so I had to learn about it. And so that's a good thing. It's a good thing when you're teaching and you learn as much as the students do, I think. My most successful series is the Sara Booth Delaney mystery series. There are 26 books in that series now. It's published by St. Martin's Press, and it's set in the Mississippi Delta. And it follows the adventures of Sara Booth Delaney, who wanted to be a Broadway actress, but failed and came back to the Mississippi Delta and kind of fell into being a private investigator by stealing her friend's dog and ransoming it back, which you're told never to do in a story. It's hard to redeem someone who does something like that, but we did redeem Sara Booth. And it's interesting now because 26 books into it, she carries this guilt and she is desperate to confess to her friend what she did, but she can't. She absolutely can't because it will ruin their friendship. It's unforgivable, but Tinky is the one who gave her the money to get the dog back. And that was the money that saved her family home. And then Tinky hired her for her first case. Now Tinky is her partner in the detective agency. So it's kind of a mismatched duo. Sara Booth is like me, a tomboy, horses, the land, all this kind of stuff. And she's deeply involved in that. And Tinky is a daddy's girl. And if you've ever been to the Mississippi Delta, you know exactly what a daddy's girl is. These are very attractive, well-groomed women who have been raised in the art of male manipulation. And Tinky is a master at it. And Sara Booth has grown to envy this talent because she's blunt. And so she doesn't really, Tinky can get whatever she wants with a smile and a pleasant word. And Sara Booth will butt heads. So they make a good team for solving mysteries. The books are mostly set in the Delta, though I have, taken Sara Booth to the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Dauphin Island and different places. I also write a series called the Pluto Snitch series. And one of the most common questions I get about this series, there's only 4 books in that series now, is that why Pluto Snitch? Well, the books are set in 1920 in that era, right as women were finally getting the right to vote. And the protagonist is a young woman named Raisa James, who is a widow of World War I. But she has a partner, Reginald Proctor, who is a guy who worked for a time for a psychic medium in New Orleans. And Raisa discovers that she can see and communicate with the dead. So they are a paranormal detective agency, and they solve mysteries from the past. The first book in this series, The Book of Beloved, is set in Mobile, and it deals with a secret from the past and a house that's haunted. These are a little bit creepy, like a chill, like British scary stories. there's no blood, there's no gore. I don't really do that. I'm not a slasher kind of person. But the title comes from the fact that Pluto is the god of the dead, of Hades. And snitch was a slang term for a gumshoe or private investigator back in the 20s. So that's how that series began. I also write a series about Trouble, the black cat detective, and he goes everywhere. And Trouble is he's just smarter than all the bipeds. He is way smarter than any human being. He doesn't solve the mysteries. He comments on what the humans are doing wrong, and they solve the mystery, but he is really too smart for his own good. And then I did a couple of books, one of them set in Code-In called The Darkling, which is just straight up and up kind of horror. And Code-In is like the perfect setting. And that's really what I want to talk about tonight, is how setting plays such a role in my work as a fiction writer. But Code-In is perfect. I learned so much doing these books, but The Darkling is based on a little fact, I guess it would be biology fact, about the brown-headed cowbird, which I often see in the pasture with my horses. They're tiny little birds when they follow the horses, and as the horses pull at the grass, it disturbs the roots, and the cowbirds eat the insects in the dirt. But they have a very peculiar little tick. The mother cowbird lays her eggs in another bird's nest, usually a wren or warbler, a smaller bird. So she abandons the eggs once they're laid, and the mother wren hatches them out with her eggs. But the cowbird is bigger and stronger than the other birds. And if it's touched on the back, it pushes backwards, and eventually it pushes every other little bird out of the nest, so that it's the only one left. And The Darkling is about a young girl who goes to live in Code-In with a family who's renovating an old hotel there. And they have several children and a nanny, and they take in this young stray girl who is able to manifest this desperate need to be loved. She manifests an entity that takes on an image of one of the children, and then it kills that child. So I know I have a dark, twisted little mind here. But it's so fascinating because there actually was an old hotel in Code-In. And in the 1940s, Code-In was kind of a hideaway for a lot of Hollywood personalities. They would go there and have seclusion and privacy, and could carry on however they wanted, and nobody reported it to the press or the studios. And so it was a really kind of cool place for them to be. So I learned a lot about Code-In and that part of the area from doing research for that book. I have no idea how I come up with these ideas. So I just, I'm working on a Sara Booth synopsis now, and it's just terrible. It's called Jaws Bones, and it's about a bull shark in the Mississippi River. And they can actually live in fresh water, and they have been known to travel up the river all the way to St. Louis, Missouri. So the things that I find that spark that desire to write a story about them, and of course Jaws, Jaws was a movie that was kind of like the classic college movie for me. So I have great fondness for it. But so that's kind of the thing that brings me into story writing. And I write every day. I have to. If I let too much time go by, then I get kind of afraid of my story. I'm afraid that I can't get back in it. And so it's just easier to write every day. to spend a little time with the story, to think about it, to work on it. And of course, working on the farm, I have a lot of time cleaning stalls and, you know, doing all the physical farm labor to think about this business. So, but, you know, in writing, there are 4 elements of a novel: setting, theme, character, and plot. And when I was teaching writing at the university, I tried to let the students tell me what they wanted to write, not what I wanted them to write. So, because you know, to me, you have to really love this business. You have to have a story that must be told, and you have to really love spending a whole lot of time by yourself with your own thoughts. And if that's not for you, do something else. I always wanted to be a blues musician so I could jam with other musicians and not have to be alone all the time. But I have no talent. I can't play an instrument, and I certainly can't sing. In fact, I did a collection of short stories called Delta Blues, and I had a bunch of authors from around the South give me a story, which I edited and put in a collection, and Tyra's House was the publisher. And the stories were all centered around a mystery and the blues. And so the publisher donated all the proceeds from the book to the Mississippi Literacy Project. And Morgan Freeman wrote the foreword for us for the book. And we actually, because there were talented people who could play musical instruments and sing, we actually had our own blues band, and we performed at Ground Zero Blues Club in Clarksdale. But I was a backup singer. They turned my microphone off. Now, you have to have a good sense of humor to be a writer, because writers are devils. And if you can't laugh at yourself, they'll get you. But to me, I think that characters, I was going to tell you about plot, setting, character, and theme. So when I ask students what they want to write, they'll usually say something like, I want to write a book like To Kill a Mockingbird. So to really be an effective writer, you have to learn how to identify what you're writing, because you have to know where you have to be a marketer on some level to be successfully published. You at least have to have an idea of what publishers are looking for. So the way that I taught was a lot of the students wanted to write genre fiction, which is what I write, which was fine with me. But so like if you have a mystery, if you have the 4 elements, plot, setting, theme, and character, what's the most important one for a mystery? It would either be plot or character, depending on what kind of mystery you're reading. For romance, it's almost always going to be character, because there is not a real complex plot in a romance. It's more boy meets girl, they get together, they have a misunderstanding or something happens, but it's more about how they feel about each other than whatever. If you look at a book like Gone with the Wind, a lot of people want to classify it as a romance, but I would not. It's a historical novel to me, and it is, it's certainly not a romance. It doesn't have a happy ending, and that is one of the prerequisites of romance, is a happy ending. So when you begin to explore all of these things and you learn a little bit of understanding about how the business works, then you have more chance of success. But setting, to me, is the one thing that you really can't fake. Now, I've never killed anybody, but I can fake a good murder and enjoy doing so, I might add. But setting, to me, characters come from the soul that they are born in, that they grow up in. And to be true to that is one of the most important things that a writer can do. I also believe that there is more truth in fiction than there is in fact, because you can understand the motivation of a character in fiction, which in fact, I was a journalist for 10 years. It's very hard sometimes to know the true motivation of why they do what they do. I had a great example of that when I used to do the police docket. And it was just a list, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so was arrested and charged with vagrancy or whatever. And one of my classmates was charged with armed robbery of a small grocery store. I put it in the paper. His mother got very, very angry at me and called, and, you know, and I talked to her, and she said to me, and this is one of the reasons I went into fiction more than journalism. She said, you know, he did that. He robbed that grocery store. But what you don't know is that his son is dying of leukemia and he could not get medical treatment. So when you understand the motivation of a character, then it makes it a lot more complex and a lot more interesting to me than somebody just robbed a small grocery store. So setting, and that is the South has always been such a rich and fascinating setting because it's a lot. It used to really be unique. It's becoming more homogenized with television and, you know, and the internet, of course. I mean, I grew up way before the internet. So I grew up sitting on the front porch shelling peas with my grandmother, listening to oral stories from the neighbors. People would stop by and sit on the porch and have a chat and tell stories. And I'm from that oral tradition of storytelling. I really love it. And when people ask me, you know, what kind of writer are you? I'm like, I'm just a storyteller. That's what I do. I love telling stories, and I love telling ghost stories in particular. I don't know why. I have no clue why that gives me such immense pleasure, but it does. It makes my friends get tired of me sometimes because I'm always concocting some foolishness with them. To me, setting is one of the most crucial and often one of the most overlooked elements. It's very, very important in fantasy and sci-fi. If you've ever read Tolkien and Middle-earth, world building is a huge, important thing in fantasy writing. And in creating a believable place with rules and regulations that follow the common sense that's established in that world. You can't have somebody who can become invisible and then they can't be invisible unless there's a rational explanation for it. So once you start world building and establishing that, then you must continue it. And it's complicated. With the Sara Booth books, since I'm writing the 27th one now, I should have made a little diorama of the town so that I didn't put one building on top of another. What I did was I just used the layout from my hometown of Loosedale, you know, Main Street, Back Street, Courthouse Square, your basic little southern town, county seat setting. And the town of Xenia and is fictional. And of course, I just made it up. But it's located in the Delta, close to where Clarksdale would be. And I have no idea why I set the story there, except when the characters came to me, that's where they were from. They told me, I didn't tell them. So I had to do an immense amount of research to make it believable. But that was fun too, because I had a very, very good friend who loved to dance. Now, I love to dance. I'm terrible at it, but I love it. And so we spent a summer driving around the Delta, you know, and going to juke joints and dancing and just getting a feel for the Delta, because it's very different from down here. Like the Mississippi Gulf Coast is truly different from the Delta. And Mobile is different from the Mississippi Gulf Coast, even though it's an hour away. There are distinctions. And with the daddy's girls and the soul at the Delta is so rich. They say that you can grow anything there, and that the topsoil is 8 feet deep from the alluvial flooding of the rivers before they built the levee system. So in working on Jaws bones about the shark, I'm also writing about the 1927 flood of the Delta, which is still listed as the worst natural disaster in US history. Over 1,000 people drowned. And Greenville was totally underwater. It's kind of an interesting story because a lot of people fled to the levee because they thought the levee would hold. And it didn't, it broke. And so then they were marooned on the levee. And some of the people who were in charge didn't want to rescue them because they were afraid if they took them off the levee to dry land, they wouldn't come back to work. So it's kind of a crazy story. But once again, I get to do research. And I hated history in high school. In college, I hated it. It was like, why do I need to know all these? Why do I need to memorize all these facts and all these dates and all these names that mean nothing? But as an adult, I'm a huge fan of history and learning about the past, because I do believe it's a way to keep from repeating it. So we want to repeat the good things, but not the bad things. So with Mississippi and the distinct regions, the coast, the Delta, the northern regions, which is more Tennessee than Mississippi, really, in traditions and stuff. It's a fascinating world to me. And Alabama is equally fascinating. You've got your Delta system in Alabama that's aquatic, and it's a fascinating place. Can you imagine the number of bodies I could hide there? So, and I just, there's the wiregrass, and Alabama has a more mountainous area. I did one of the Pluto Snitch books set on Sand Mountain, and I knew very little about Sand Mountain going into it, except that it was well known to have very isolated communities, and there were a lot of kind of strange religious practices. But I was not aware how truly isolated some of those communities were until I started doing the research. And this book is called A Visitation of Angels. And Reginald and Raisa are hired by this woman who has been ostracized by her community because she had a child out of wedlock, and the child was born with webbed hands and feet. And she tells the community that his father is an angel. And so they think she's really blasphemous and a very bad person. And there's a murder in the town, but this young woman has the ability to dream the truth. She can dream what actually happened. So she knows that the person accused of the murder didn't do it, because the murderer had a scar on his thumb, and she can see the hands of the murderer. She can't see his face, only his hands. And she knows it is not the person who's in jail for it. And they are just getting ready to lynch him, to hang him. So she has to, Raisa has to figure it out before it's too late to save him. And it's a paranormal element to it. So, but Sand Mountain is the perfect setting for that kind of story with the isolation and being, you know, not having in the 1920s, no access to phones or really not very good running cars. So I think when you frame up any kind of story, you really have to think about where the story grows from. I'm just reissuing, in fact, they're all out now, the Jacksonville Chronicles. It's a set of books. It was my first published books, and they were published in 1994 and 1996 and 2000. And they're set in the small rural town of Jacksonville in 1926, 1953, 63, and then contemporary. And they're more literary. They grow from that little town. The characters all are related through the McVeigh family, although the books are not interwoven. You can read one and you don't have to read the others or whatever. But I don't know that I could write about any place other than the South, because I'm so much a daughter of the South, and I'm so connected to the land and the seasons. And I think that's one of the real benefits of being a farm girl and having horses, is that I keep that really close connection with nature. And I worry that a lot of people are losing it. I had students in college they'd never been in a barn. They had never been inside a barn. And that makes me very sad, because growing up, you know, going to the neighbors and playing and gathering eggs. Well, I lived in town in Lucedale, so I didn't have to pick peas and stuff, but I had friends who farmed, their families farmed, and it was always a joy to me to go home with them and get to pick peas or butter beans or cut okra, you know, and do all that, look for eggs. A great story. I was with my friend Janie Ruth Morgan, and we were in her little shed where the chickens roosted up above, and her mom had sent us in there to get some eggs, and Janie wore glasses, which was a good thing, because we're in there and I hear the hens cackling, and we look up and one of them poops and it hits Janie right in the eyeglass. And ooh, she was really, really mad, but I thought it was pretty funny. No harm was done. You know, her glasses protected her eye. So, but that kind of stuff has always been just, you know, heaven to me. Getting a little long in the tooth for it, actually, but I still enjoy doing it. I'm happy to talk about setting, plot, character, theme. All books have to have a theme. In a lot of romance novels, the theme is love prevails, but there's always also a more intimate and personal theme between the characters, like overcoming hardship or something. With mysteries, often the theme is justice prevails, but there's also another deeper thing. I did a book called Fever Moon, and it's a crime novel. It's set in 1944 in Iberia Parish, Louisiana. And it's a story about a woman who's accused of a brutal murder. The richest man in the parish is eviscerated on a county road, and she's found hovering over the body, covered in blood and gore. So she's arrested, and the town believes that she is a loup-garou, or rougarou, or werewolf. They believe she's a shapeshifter who takes on a beast image and kills with claws and teeth. But the deputy in the county has been in World War II, and he really knows what monsters are. And it's not some poor woman who's running a high fever and deluded. So he sets out to solve the mystery of why, you know, who really killed Henri Baptiste. But I told this, I do a lot of first person point of view, but I told this from multiple points of view because I had the postmistress, a woman who has the best job in town, the only real federal job with a regular paycheck in town, a Catholic priest, a prostitute, and the deputy. Because thematically, this was a book that developed more out of theme than plot or character. Thematically, I wanted to explore the power of belief systems. The people in this town truly believe she is a loup-garou. And they really want to kill her because they fear her so much. But there is no such thing as a loup-garou. And finally, the deputy proves this, and the true killer is revealed. But it's kind of like, I try not to limit my writing to what I think I should write or ought to write. More, I like to let the stories just come to me and I write them. I do write a Sara Booth book every year, but I'm fortunate to be a quick writer. So that leaves me time to write just whatever I want to write as another aside. And I'm very fortunate to be able to do that, to have publishers who will take on that work and, you know, and do it with me, because it's a hard road to hoe if you don't have a good publisher. So I'd like to open it up for some questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, and before we get to questions, I just wanted to mention here, we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. If you're just joining in now, we're joined by Carolyn Haines. She is the author of the Sara Booth Delaney series, recipient of the Harper Lee Award for Distinguished Writing, the Richard Wright Award for Literary Excellence, and the Mississippi Writers Guild Lifetime Achievement Award. She's also an Alabama Writers Hall of Fame inductee. And please let us know if you have any questions. I've got a couple that I'm gonna throw in the ring. How long does it usually take you to write a book? I know you said that you write a Sara Booth Delaney mystery every year, but how long does that process usually take you?
Well, if I'm, in the draft mode, in the first draft, that usually takes about 4 or 5 months. And then there's the editing process. But, if I'm going to write a scary book, I work on it in the mornings because if I write it at night, I scare myself. And then I have to call my neighbor across the street for he and his wife to come over and check my closets. And it embarrasses me to have to do that. So I try to do that in the morning early, and then I have all day to get over the jitters. So I can, it's like I can read more than one book at once. So I can write more than one book at once. And it gives me a sense, I'm very goal driven. When I had a swimming pool here before I filled it in, I swam laps. And I didn't rest on a float and drink margaritas. I swam laps. I'm very goal driven. So I achieved my word count goal for the day. And if I can do it on 2 books, I'm good. Then I can have a glass of wine and watch something on TV or, do something with the dogs. Because I have 17 cats, 9 dogs, and 2 horses.
Oh, wow.
I know. So I really do work to pay the vet bills, and it's fine. I'm happy to do it.
We got an Instagram user that asks, do you have the same publisher for all of your books?
No, I have different publishers. I've worked pretty much around New York for Dutton, Bantam, Random House, St. Martin's is my Sara Booth Delaney publisher, but other ones, Pegasus published The Darkling and The Seeker. The Seeker, I went far afield with that book. It's another horror book, and it's set at Walden Pond in Massachusetts, and it's based loosely on Thoreau's life there, in my fictional rendering of it. Thoreau was not alone. He had a lover who was psychically talented.
Wow. How was writing the setting up in Massachusetts? How did that go? Was
hard. That was hard. I have a friend who lives in Rhode Island, and I've spent some time visiting her, and she kindly took me to Walden Pond and all around and visited the whaling was a big business in that area. And so I saw a lot. She helped me out a lot with the setting and getting the feel. But we're dealing again with characters that are connected intensely to the land. So that is the same as the South to me. The snow and the cold was a little different, but I enjoyed doing it. I had a good time doing the research.
So there were a lot of similarities there, but it's just a different challenge on how you approach it.
That's correct. I don't know that I would deliberately choose to set a book in an area that I'm so unfamiliar with, but I mean, it was about Thoreau. It had to be there. There wasn't any way I could move Thoreau to the Delta in Mississippi. It had to be what it was.
Oh, somebody asks, are most of your cats outside cats?
Sadly, no. A lot of them go in and out, but some of them, I inherited 6 cats from my brother when he passed away, and they were feral. So they're in the house because I'm afraid to let them out for fear they'll not come back. They're getting better as they get. If I can walk up to them and pick them up, they can go outside because then I know I can catch them. But if they're skittish, no. And let me see if I can introduce you to my sister who lived in New York City died. And this is her cat, one of her cats. He's 18, Dick Cheney. Named because he is so damn mean that I have to keep him in a cage unless I have a harness and leash on him. And so when I'm not doing this, he's down with me on a harness and leash. And he is quite a character. He's very loving and wonderful to me, but he wants to kill every other cat. He wants to kill them all. And I don't understand why. But I have her 2 cats and her 3 dogs and then I, picked up a bunch of other ones on my own. I didn't need any help acquiring them. So they go in and out. I would prefer that they go out, but some of them I just can't risk. They have health issues. A lot of these animals are old and they have health issues. So I need to keep them where I can doctor and give them their medicine.
Do any of your animals that you take care of, do any of them end up in your novels?
All the time. I've got let's see, I don't know if you can see, the red-bone hound over there is Sweetie Pie. Her real name is Eudora Welty. I picked her up coming back from the Eudora Welty Symposium. Lay off, Dick Cheney. And she is undergoing cancer treatment. She's doing pretty good. Dick Cheney, quit poking me with your paw. But I have to say, on Facebook, I post these terrible things like I'm snuggling on the sofa with Dick Cheney. And it's so bad that it's funny. You have to have a good sense of humor.
So what do you feel is the hardest part about writing a good mystery story?
Mysteries have to be plotted. you can't, like Summer of the Redeemers and Touch, I didn't know anything about writing. I just sat down and wrote a book. And as it turned out, I was very lucky. But mysteries, there's an expectation with the reader that you plant clues and red herrings so that they can solve the mystery with you as they read. And to really properly lay your clues and red herrings, you have to have a plot and you have to know where you're going. And that to me is the hardest. I'm not a plotter by nature. And when we sold the first of the Bones books, Them Bones to Random House, the book sold at auction, and it was crazy. And it turned out that they wanted a 3-book contract for a mystery. I didn't really believe Them Bones was a mystery. I thought it was just a Southern novel, a story. But they viewed it as a mystery series, and it really put me into a dead panic because I didn't think I could plot a mystery because I had never viewed myself in that way. But by God, I learned it. So it's amazing what opportunity will do for you.
Now, you talked a lot about, really character-driven stories. How do you come up with these characters? How do they end up in your stories?
Most often they come to me like a little movie clip, and I see them. There's not sound. I just see what they're doing and follow them. And then I have to write the book to figure out who they are. But with Sara Booth, it was oral. I was sitting here at my computer looking out the window at my horses thinking, you better come up with a story, girl. You need to sell a book. And I heard Sara Booth, and Sara Booth it's a humorous mystery, and she is haunted by a ghost named Jitty that's connected to her family. And Jitty's real bossy. Jitty is really bossy. And she portrays the thematic elements of each book by her dress. And in the first book, Jitty's in the 1970s, and she just wants Sara Booth to find herself a man and get pregnant and have a baby so that Jitty has someone to haunt in the next generation. And Sara Booth's not exactly inclined to follow that advice, but I did have this moment of little sweet revenge. And I have a wonderful friend. We've been friends since we were 5 years old. Her name is Debbie. And Debbie and I went to college together. And every outfit that Debbie wore in college, velveteen hot pants, white go-go boots, Jitty wears in Them Bones. So, writers get to have a little fun with their friends sometimes. So they come different ways, and I think the story is a gift, and it's my job to tell the story that's given to me the best way I can. And that means not going in with any predetermined, I'm going to turn it into this or make it that or do this or that. I just try to listen to the story and tell it the best I can.
Okay. You had also mentioned before themes and how important they are to a story. So when you're writing a story like that, how do the themes come into it?
Well, it's different ways. I'm trying to think of a solid example. And of course, my little pea brain goes blank. But I think that with the mysteries, of course, you do have to give that satisfactory ending where the guilty party is revealed and justice is done. But like with Fever Moon, which is a crime novel, it's about the power of belief systems. And even though that's never stated in the story or none of the characters think that, it's hopefully what the reader is driven to understand about the book. And that's kind of my favorite type of writing, which is strongly themed. And I know mysteries don't have to have a lot of thematic elements in them, but I try hard to include that richness in the story, because I think, a novel is all four of those elements woven together, and each element carries weight. But in genre fiction like romance, if the characters are primary and the plot is secondary, then you have kind of a little out of balance. So your weaving would be different. It would be a more stronger flow. That probably makes no sense to anyone but me. But writers are kind of eccentric and crazy anyway.
Yeah, it's okay. I think I understand what you're saying. Now what's your favorite genre?
That's hard. That's hard. My favorite, I can tell you who my favorite writer is, James Lee Burke. And he has a series set in Iberia Parish. And in fact, I'll tell you one quick little story. I was so taken with Mr. Burke's work. I read the first book of his I read was Black Cherry Blues. And his protagonist is named Dave Robichaux, and he's a former alcoholic deputy. And so I got so caught up in this world. His use of language is exquisite, and his characterization's fabulous. So I decided I was going over to Iberia Parish to do some research for Fever Moon. So I had to go. And I talked one of my friends from grammar school into going with me. So we were going to Cajun dance and eat Cajun food and learn the Cajun way of life. So we stayed at a bed and breakfast, and the woman who ran it sent us to some restaurants and clubs, and we're at one of the clubs. And I walk in the door, and there's a band at one end and a bar at the other. And it's mostly people, I was in my 30s at the time, a good bit older than me. It's very safe, very family oriented. So we go in, we don't even sit down for people ask us to dance. We dance from like 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning. And we dance mostly with this table full of guys. They had one woman sitting with them. I couldn't understand anything anybody said. I just I couldn't follow it. So the next night, we had a blast. And the next night, we go to a different place where Dawn sends us. And we ran into one of the ladies who was helping us learn the dance steps. And she goes, "Oh, you girls are so kind." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, you don't know, do you?" And I said, "No, ma'am. What is it we should know?" And she said, "That table full of men you danced with all night, they were out on weekend pass from the mental institution." I thought it was great. I said, "Where are they tonight?" So, that's what I love about Louisiana, man. You just, it's just a live and let live kind of place. Do we have any more questions?
Let's see. I got a couple more about the publication process.
Okay.
How many revisions does one of your books normally go through before it hits the shelves?
Well, it will go through, the acquiring editor will do a developmental edit to be sure that all the kind of loose ends are tied up. Then it'll go through generally 2 copy editing processes, and then, and then it'll be published. So it's the first edit that's always the toughest one. It's a lot. These books are close to 100,000 words. There's a lot of places for a writer to fall into a death trap and not know it. So, and I'm very lucky. My niece is a big reader, and she's been really helpful to me, because I'll write a third of the book and send it to her, and she'll read it very quickly and go, "Oh, da 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 da," and you better da da da. And so that's very helpful to me. I used to have a terrific critique group, and we met for nearly 20 years, but Nothing lasts forever.
Are there any challenges that, or any special challenges that come from writing in a story in, say, third person opposed to first person?
I think that every writer has a natural voice. And when I first started writing, because I didn't know anything about writing, I naturally drifted into first person. Um, that just is my natural voice. But third person to me was always something that challenged me, that I wanted to learn to manage and use if I needed to. So I also I wrote like a bunch of romantic mysteries, which were third person, and so I got some good training there. In fact, my editor for those books really is the person who taught me to write. I had no clue about immediate scene and narrative summary, about point of view. And I'll never forget, my editor told me one day, she said, Carolyn, I just have to tell you, you're really a point of view slut. And I'm like, what? And she said, look, you're in this scene and you're in one person's head and you hop to another person's head. That's like 19th century writing. This is what, all the old writers did in the day. And she said, in modern writing, we like to kind of keep the point of view in one person's point of view per scene. You can change point of views, but finish the scene. And that was like a revelation to me. I didn't even know I was doing it. So very helpful.
Wow. Have you ever had any like other similar situations with your editors where it's just like they completely like flipped your whole world upside down like that?
I have had a few incidents, but I'll tell you, this is really terrible. I probably shouldn't tell it, but I'm going to anyway, because that's the person I am. But I had this cat, it was a calico cat named Gumbo. And Gumbo was a feral cat that I had caught, and I had it in the house. And I'm talking to my editor on the phone. And so, we're talking, and I went to open the door to let a dog in, and Gumbo just shot out the door. And I went, well, damn it. And the editor said, is something wrong? And I said, Gumbo just shot out between my legs. And that, it's hard to recover from that. It's hard to recover from that when you're talking to a professional who's not from the South. So, yeah, I have self-sabotaged many times. But, if you can't laugh at yourself, you're lost anyway. So
that's right. Do you ever like get letters or hear from your readers?
I do get a lot of fan mail. I do, and I answer every one. I have a newsletter that, thank God, is, email, digital. And I have a website, carolynhaines.com, and you can subscribe to the newsletter there. I write one a month. And so people will email me back from the newsletter. And so I've made some very, very good friends, people I would never have met any other way.
That's really cool. Now, where can our viewers tonight find your books? Where can they purchase them at?
Well, you can purchase them online anywhere, but I'm having a book signing October 14th during Art Walk at the brand new Haunted Bookshop. They moved to across from the Sanger. And so my friend, Dean James, who I tease Dean and I call him my older brother. I will confess to you that I am older than he is, but I torment him as much as possible. So we're going to be doing a signing together. He does a series of books called The Cat in the Stacks that's centered around a librarian. They're a mystery series in a small Mississippi town, and he lives in Jackson now. I met Dean when he was manager of Murder by the Book in Houston. So he has a PhD, and he knows more about books and mysteries than anyone I know, and he's a lot of fun. So everyone can come to the book signing, see the brand new bookstore, meet Angela and her crew, who are booksellers, and have some fun with Dean and I.
That sounds like it's going to be a real fun time. Thank you for joining us tonight. We've really enjoyed hearing your insight into the writing process and hearing about your works. It means a lot to have you on here.
Appreciate it. I hope I made y'all laugh. So, it's hard to do this because I'm used to teaching where I get response from the people listening. Like, woo, I'm up here all by myself. But thank you very much for having me.
And everybody watching at home, if you've enjoyed this and you want to watch it again, it'll stay on our Facebook page. You can also find it on our website, Conde-Charlotte.com, along with all of our other entries in our 2022 virtual lecture series. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a wonderful evening.